Hey, everybody, welcome back to Northlight Photographic Workshops. And I am here in London, England, just south of London at my friend Tim Rudman's house. That's right, I've got Tim Rudman here for you today. One of the great printers and photographers living today, in my opinion. And I've known Tim for some time now, although we don't get to see each other very often. But in fact, it's the first time in about 10 years, isn't it?
Yeah, must be, yeah.
Been a time, but anyway, it's been lovely to be here with Tim, and we're just going to talk a little bit about photography right now. So anyway, Tim, thanks very much for doing this. I know that you're not a real look at me kind of a guy, so this is kind of nice for you to do this with me. I really appreciate it. And I don't know, I mean, in all these conversations we've been having over the years, I've talked to you a lot about photography, but I think I never really asked you how it was that you actually got into photography. I mean, I know that, you know, I know your history and your teaching history and things, but how did this actually begin?
It happened quite suddenly. When I was a medical student in 1961, this will be. At school, art was probably my favourite subject, and I liked to draw, always in black and white, never colour.
Interesting.
Yeah, and never was any good at colour, but I loved to sketch, so it was all charcoal, pencil, pen, black and white, water, colour. That was what I did. Then I came up to London to medical school, and shopping around the the big bookshops in London, Foyles in Charing Cross Road, I think it was, looking for pathology and anatomy books that I really couldn't afford, trying to find out how much what I could get for my money. And I turned round, and on a table display behind me was this big coffee table black and white book by Sam Haskins called Cowboy Kate. And you should look it up if you don't already know.
Cowboy Kate got you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I picked it up and I opened it, and it was that moment I knew it was black and white, it was high contrast, it was grain, it was on an angle, dynamic, close-up shots of this girl, Kate presumably, in a cowboy saloon bar. The saloon bar doors were prominent, and she come in and she had a hat and a gun belt, not a lot else, perhaps a little bit of a waistcoat. Surprisingly, actually, that wasn't what excited me as much as the dynamic graphic of the image in black and white. I had no idea that photography could be used like that. I'd always, just as much as I knew of it, thought of it as a recording medium, and suddenly it was art. And it was that Damascus Road moment
that got you.
That got me, and I knew for that minute that was what I was going to do, and as well as my medicine.
Right.
And within about 2 weeks, I had located a dark room in a community-based dark room.
Really? So
and
you
I
went
was
right
trying
at
to teach myself how to make prints with some old negatives that I'd taken on my box brownie and other things.
Right, things that you had before. So you'd had a camera before, but you'd
Well,
never
there'd be
really
the cameras
seen it
in
that
the family.
Yeah.
I went for example, I went in 1962 on a 3-month vacation to America, organised through the London Union, London University Union.
Yes.
And the deal was they flew you out and they flew you back on a charter flight, just students. And we had a 99-day Greyhound ticket for $99, which we had to buy. So I went with a friend, and for 99 days we toured around, sleeping on buses because we had no money. We were poor.
Yeah.
And we ended up at one point in Seattle.
Wow, this is quite a...
And this was the World Fair in Seattle. As it happens, we didn't know. We just went there and it was on. And I was walking along with my box brownie camera, and I turned round, and walking towards me, just sort of wandering through with a few people around him, maybe 4 or 5 people, was Elvis Presley.
Oh my God, I was just going to say you were there with Elvis Presley because of the movie.
Yeah, well, my story is,
Oh
of
my
course, I
God.
was just walking along and I suddenly
And there's
heard someone
Elvis.
say, "Hey, isn't that Tim Rudman?" And there was Elvis. But anyway, I took him on my box brownie. So I have
That's
a picture on a box
fantastic. So
brownie.
you have a picture of Elvis at the state fair.
I do.
Oh, Tim, you're going to have to show me that somehow. Oh, you don't know
I
where
have
it is?
no idea
Oh,
where it is.
no. Oh my gosh,
It's
that's
lost in history.
fantastic.
Anyway, I started to teach myself to print
Yeah.
every opportunity that I got, and that was it. I was off, and I read everything I could read.
Yeah.
And I also found there was a lot of stuff when I got more proficient at printing. I found that there was a lot of stuff that wasn't written down,
Exactly.
and a lot of secrets were kept. And I remember vowing to myself that one day, if I ever really crack this, I'll write a book with all the secrets in it that I've learned, because, you know, I come from a culture where knowledge is shared,
Yeah.
not kept
Well, it has to be.
closeted away. And I thought, you know, this needs to be out there. So that's eventually, many years later, what I did. But that's how that germ was.
So that calling of kind of the educational part of it, that's how it came as well.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about that earlier. We were off camera earlier talking about things, and I was talking about how I just love this YouTube channel for doing that same thing, is teaching people things to do. And so we kind of come at it from the same direction there. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is the magic room. Oh. This is a smell I miss so bad. My darkroom doesn't smell like this anymore.
I've got chest freezer for 2016s here. So I've got
Okay,
some
that's
list
our
papers
1620
in there.
paper in there.
I've got a lot of this old Sterling list and Coda list.
That's your Kent mirror.
Yeah.
Do you get in here very often to print these days?
Well, I haven't been doing much lately. Not as regularly. I mean, I used to be here all the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, we had some family issues which we talked about.
Yeah.
And followed by COVID, and I sort of lost my
Lost your sparks.
spark for a bit. But I have been printing stuff for orders and things.
Yeah.
I printed a lot of Brighton Pier images for orders. The old derelict pier.
Oh man, I like nothing more than going in other people's darkrooms and seeing.
Well, it's just.
This is awesome, Tim. I feel like I'm in the belly of the beast. Can't believe I'm here, actually. Wow.
It's just sort of bits and pieces of handheld, you know, dodges and stuff.
That's fantastic, Tim. This is like a shrine. Here.
I've
It's
never
beautiful.
been a big kit person, you know.
No, me either,
Never.
but this is really nice, though. That's why I like to see this.
I've never been one that has to have all the latest stuff. Oh,
Yeah,
pull that
me
string
either.
up there.
This one here?
Yeah,
There we go. Fantastic. Thank you for showing me that.
that's okay.
And this is your dry area?
This is my print finishing room.
Beautiful.
Cutters, I've got cutters and.
Be surprised how many people are now starting to look for dry mounting presses again. You
Yeah,
know?
they're really useful, and they're very good just for flattening prints.
Yeah, that's how I use them.
That's really good. I took that on your first trip.
Oh my God.
Remember that?
Yes, I do. That was at Shoreleafshafty. Yep, I remember that very well, Tim.
I took that on your first trip.
Remember we got all the way out to the ocean there, you know, which is probably the only time I ever did that, because it's a long way out to the ocean at that point. You know, you remember at that
Yeah,
where
I
those
do.
rocks are.
Yeah, I've been there many times since.
Yeah,
And you can go around and back onto the road.
under the road that way on the other side. Yeah, yeah, that's quite a place. Wow, this is fantastic. Oh my God! Yep, Professor Long here. Tipitina's.
Oh, yeah, it's cool.
Did you get to go to Tipitina's
Yeah.
when you were down there? Yeah.
I bought that in New Orleans.
Nice. Oh boy, Tim.
He's great. I love.
Yeah.
So long.
I didn't realize you were such a big blues fan.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got a great collection of blues. They're all CDs, but I still use CDs.
Yeah.
I've got hundreds of them.
I haven't been doing much of either. Oh, there's another one. Yeah. There's Bits of Iceland.
Oh, that's been a nice. That was going to be the cover of my next book, but I shelved that in the end, which was a shame.
You're not going to do another book?
No, I don't think so. The Iceland book was self-published. I'd always wanted to do my own book.
You did it right.
The paper, get the size right, choose all the fonts, everything.
Yeah.
And then we had 1,000 books delivered, and then there was the process. And then I suddenly began to think, when Natalie died, I think it was. Suddenly, I thought, well, if I suddenly died and Ingrid's left with all this stuff.
I feel that too sometimes, it's like.
I took a mock-up and a presentation to 3 of the big museum galleries that had handled the Iceland work exhibition, which toured for 2 years.
Yeah.
And in Australia. And all 3 said, yes, we'll take it. Firm yes, on the spot. So it was set up, and I had cover design, I had...
you had it all ready to go.
I'd done a lot of work on it, so I had a lot of content. But then I suddenly thought, no, it could happen to me with our family history. I'm still here. I never expected to be here.
Yeah, well...
So...
But it should be seen, though. That's the thing. I mean, I don't want to argue it with you, but it's definitely, if you're thinking of doing
cool?
it, yeah, it's awesome. It reminds me of this. There's a Marion Post Walcott, of the town with the lamp post that it's snowing on, and this is what it reminds me of. Whose is this?
Vic Hatfield. He was a friend of mine.
Oh, yeah.
He took that. As you can see, London Bobby.
Yeah. Doing his traffic thing. Do they still wear the bobby caps? I'm sure they do.
They don't look like that anymore.
No.
Really. I mean, all these white.
Oh yeah.
It's a day gone by. Martin's Bank, London. You'll never see that again.
So, your work is just stunning. I mean, I'm going to run some things over this as we're talking, but your work is just stunning. And so you're saying that it was kind of in the early '60s then that you started picking this up.
Yeah, but I wouldn't regard myself as that was where it started.
Yeah, that's where it began, right?
The enthusiasm was there, but the skill had yet to follow, really.
So over years, I mean, like many of us as photographers, scientists, doctors, it's interesting how photography draws certain types of minds, and you obviously being no different there, but you were fostering this as a doctor all these years at the same time that you were becoming a photographer as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering about that balance. I mean, you were getting serious about your work, but I mean, probably nothing like you are now. I mean, obviously,
that's true.
But I'm just wondering, how were you able to do that? I mean, it's always been a problem for a lot of people I know to keep those 2 careers going, because photography as a career itself is very difficult, as I know. And I always admire the people that have been able to keep their day job and keep loving their day job at the same time as fostering this. And you've done this extremely successfully. So I'm wondering, how did that come about? I mean,
well, it was never planned. It just evolved. It just evolved. I was lucky because in my early part of my medical career, I did about 5 years in hospital practice, going from speciality to speciality, the things I was interested in.
Right.
And every hospital, every big major hospital, which is the hospitals I worked in, they always had a pathology department, and part of the pathology department was the darkroom.
Yep.
Because everything was on film.
Everything has to be filmed.
This was pre-digital.
Yeah.
And so I was able to use the darkrooms at night when they weren't in use.
Nice.
And every hospital I went agreed to that.
And they allowed you to do that.
And they allowed me to do that.
And so you were able to keep fostering the photography at the same time.
Yeah.
Because those of you that don't know, I mean, Tim is one of the most amazing printers there are, and you'll see some of his photographs here, but to actually see them in the flesh is a completely other experience. And, for somebody to get that good, you've got to put a lot of time into it. I mean, I know that as well.
I tend to be OCD anyway.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Or CDO if you put them in the right order.
In the correct order, right?
Yeah, I tend to be that way.
A lot of us are like that as well,
But it's it's important,
Right.
but it's also, it can be a hindrance, because I print something and I will finally get it saying what I want, because it's not about how it's the exact print, it's about it saying what I want it to say, which is often quite different to what's on the negative in a way. And I'll print and I think, oh, I just need maybe an eighth of a stop in this corner, and then
Right.
oh, that's a bit better, but it's slightly unbalanced. I just need to, and I'll make maybe half a dozen, and then I think, right, I'll make a mark on the one I really liked, and then I'll look at them the next day when everything's dried down, and I can't tell which is which. So,
This is another commonality, because I've spent many a night printing 20 prints of the same thing, trying to get it right. And then I get up in the morning and I can't tell the difference in any of them.
Well, when I
and
started
it's
lith
about
printing,
our drive in there, I think.
Yeah, when I started lith printing, which is something I knew nothing about,
Right.
because it wasn't around in those days. But when I hooked onto it later, I started to experiment. There was nothing really written about it that I could find.
No.
Gene Nocon had a small chapter in his book on printing. I knew Gene.
Mm-hmm.
We'd become good friends.
Oh, yeah.
And he showed me his lith prints. I wasn't that interested because I was doing something else, but he was really excited about this thing which he was getting into. So it was a few years later, it takes a while for things to sort of percolate.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to have a go at this. And I printed, and I knew you could get some colours with lith printing. And I was printing on papers I thought would work, and I printed. I wanted to get the pinks coming through on certain papers which I knew they could deliver.
Right.
And I tried everything, and I changed the strength, I changed the development, I changed the time, the dilution, I changed the amount of exposure, and I changed the snatch point, and all these things which can radically change
Change the whole thing.
They were all taught me a huge amount, but none of them had any pinks. And then I spread them out all over the spare rooms to dry off and went to bed. The next morning I came in and they were all pink. And that taught me my first, my next important lesson about lith is it's not just dry down, you get what I call colour down, because the colours change and suddenly colours emerge, which maybe weren't even there. That's with the older papers.
Yeah.
So that was how it slowly evolved.
So this is one of the things I remember years ago we were talking about this, and I was asking you about the toning book, because that's how I became, introduced to you. And I asked you, how did you even come about doing that? And you talked to me about, your kind of infinite testing of things and just trying things out. So that's what happened with your paper. You just started trying all different papers.
Yeah, what happens if is one of the most important questions if you're questing after something in an analog-like medium like that.
And that's something that I think is missing in a lot of people. I mean, in myself, I think that I tend to be a little bit more, I like watching other people's testings and seeing what I like from that, and then kind of taking that along. I mean, I've never had that diligence to be able to do it.
It depends how you learn. I mean, I've watched other people and I learn from doing that, and I'll remember it for a few days, but slowly it disappears.
Yeah.
When you're testing for yourself, it reinforces it, but also it allows you to explore avenues which you hadn't thought of when you started
out.
And
right.
you could suddenly
Opens
think,
new
that's
doors.
interesting. What happens if I change the bleach and then do that? What does that do? And so I had this sort of questing mind which wanted to go down all these little alleys, and lots of them, of course, didn't work. You kiss a lot of frogs, and every so often you get a prince.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was impressed by that book so much with, though, is that the fact that you had, and once again, saying what I said before, is it allowing somebody else to do all those testings and going in there and reading it. And I was just amazed at the amount of depth you went into it, which is why it's such a great book.
Well, it was fun, really.
Yeah,
I didn't start it out with an intention to write a book on toning.
Right.
I had to learn toning first. So this was just getting into it and finding out how it all worked, and then finding out how the chemistry worked, which for non-chemists out there actually is frightening. You just need to know what to do. You
What to
don't
do with it.
need to have a deep knowledge of chemistry, but
No.
you know, I knew a bit about chemistry. I'd done degree level,
Right.
so that helped.
You were comfortable handling it.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
of course.
I mean, a lot of people that I teach, they're ending up, as to how I was when I was doing wet plate, I wanted to work with somebody handling the chemistry first because I
Right.
just wasn't as confident with it myself. Yeah, and I mean, but a lot of this stuff you've kind of almost invented on your own, though. I mean, because you also did the lith book, which is pretty impressive as well. I mean, equally as impressive as the toning, just in the different levels you went into the different papers and the different processing and things like that. And you spawned a lot of people. You know,
Oh, that is good. Isn't
I
it?
remember back in the APUG days, you know, everybody started doing that. You know, I mean, my friend Marianne Priest, you know, she got really good at it, and I think that you probably helped her all out with that. And you know, you're always very free with your knowledge, which was really nice too.
Well,
but
that's the background. You know,
Yeah.
knowledge should be free.
it should be. I mean, we're all. We wouldn't be the humans we are now. if
And
it
not
was for
everything you
collective.
read is true, not only in the newspapers, but I found there are a lot of things that are written down in books which are copied down from what someone else wrote.
Exactly. Nobody really tried it. I find those all
and
the
you
time.
test those things out, and actually they don't work like that.
No. Yeah.
They do in my book.
They do in your book. Yeah, well, and I've found that in other things that I've, you know, somebody's kind of sort of right information will lead me down the right path eventually, and I'll figure it out. But yeah, that is true. So are those, you know, I just, it's nice talking to you about photography because you talk about it in terms of what you're trying to say
Yeah.
rather than, you know, the graphics. I mean, a lot of us get drawn to it because of the graphic qualities and, you know, shapes and things like that. But it's those people that actually start to say something with their work that I think, at least in my world, go a cut above. And you've always done that, and it's evident in your work. So I guess that I'm trying to frame this question in a way to get you to talk about your creative process. I mean, do you know, are you just enamored by things you see, or are you a mind's eye kind of a guy that sees something there that you know it can be and you work on that? I mean, I tend to be that way. Or do you let things happen haphazardly, or do
Well,
you know what you're looking for?
It's both of those, really. I never research something and think, oh, I'm going to go there and I look up the sunrise and the sunset
Right.
at times and
Right.
the direction of, you know.
Which is a little
I-
too pedant, a little too.
Well, a lot of people really need, their minds work that way. Mine works a different way.
right.
So I go and explore, and if it speaks to me, then I get drawn in, I suppose. And then when I start to explore, when I find something I want to photograph, and I'll explore it like I guess every photographer, and angles and lens, you know, distances and lenses.
And things. Right.
And then, but once I get it, I see it how I want it to print. I don't really see it as it is, I see a print.
Exactly.
And I know that that's what I'm going to do with it. And it might take quite a few steps.
To get it to that point.
Bleaches, developers, liths, toners. But I know what it will say, and I know how it's going. I can see it before I press the button, and that's just the way I see it, I suppose. So it's a bit of intuitive waiting to find things rather than planning to go at a certain time to a certain spot to shoot a certain thing.
I mean, I understand that, and I have all the respect in the world for people that do that, but I've never had that patience, and I also think that if I try too hard on something, it looks like I've tried too hard on it. You know what I mean?
But the first time we went to Iceland together,
Right.
It was probably 3 or 4 days before I shot a frame, and I just
Yeah.
couldn't. It didn't speak to me. I, for many years, wanted to go to Iceland, which was so keen.
Yeah.
To go on your trip when I saw it, because it became very popular.
Yeah. But we were there before
in the
all that.
70s,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
A little flourish of popularity, and I had seen an advert for a little bell tent camping trip through the Highlands. Through
See,
the
you were probably
interior.
getting that more here than we were, because Iceland was just this.
Yeah. And then I thought, well, everyone's going. I'm not going to do this. Very much on an amateur
Yeah.
level. So I dropped it from my mind. But then I started to think about it many years later, maybe a decade or two later. And then suddenly your trip came out. I think it was the first one you'd done. And I thought, right, that's my chance, because at least I'll know where to go and what the geography is like and what it looks like and where the roads go. And
that was the idea of those trips too, is to, at first there was this kind of threatening thing about Iceland, and so what they did is I sort of like just opened it up to people to come on the trip and see that this isn't a great threatening place. It is a good place to go. And I've always thought that they were good for that, to do your initial scouting trip and then go back at it on your own, which you did.
Yeah.
So, and fantastically well, which was really amazing to see.
But it was on your trip that I actually found my connection with Iceland.
And I remember the moment, we were talking about that earlier, is Tim was with us for several days, and I had known of Tim prior. Just having you come on that trip was a bit of a, I was a little nervous, and I really wanted you to have a good time. And for those first few days, I was a little, I could tell you weren't feeling it. I'm like that too. I go to someplace new, and it takes you a while to develop a relationship with it.
Yeah.
But with that day when it happened, and you walked off into that garden of rocks and disappeared for several hours, and actually I got worried about you. And when you emerged, you were a completely different person.
Yeah.
You had this smile on your face, and you were light, and you were telling me about how when you were a child, it reminded you of an area where you had played when you were a young boy. And it was wonderful to see that
Mm.
waking up, and then to see what you did with it over the next 10 years was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because I think you've probably been the one person that's probably been to Iceland about as many times as I've been now.
I don't think so. No.
Well,
Not
I'm
as
a little
not as
obsessive,
many
but
as you,
I'm up in that 40 range now. But
oh no, nowhere near as many as that.
But you did such a, I mean, I don't want to be me talking about you, but you did such a great job on it. The book was fantastic, and it's quite a legacy to leave behind.
Thank you. It was, I didn't intend to do a book. I mean, it was just just
it
photography
grew.
and getting feelings out on paper.
Yeah.
That's all it was. And it was probably after a few years of this, I suddenly started to think, book. And then, of course, there's that long process of, well, what sort of book is it going to be? How's it going to be? There are no people in any of my Iceland pictures.
No, I try not to do that as well.
And you can see where people have been.
Yeah, I like that. I like to
see the effects.
I call it the human stain.
Yeah. That's very good.
Yeah,
that's really
one.
good.
Yeah.
So you could see so eventually how it came. When we went through many sort of formats, maybe different seasons, or maybe high key pictures, sections, and low key, and eventually it just sort of found its own path, unlike any of those. And it's about connection with the land, and how the land then gradually began to show signs of what man was doing to it. But no men, and then various bits of the fishing industry and the smoking, and then finishing up with the gravestones, and then the atoms go back into the universe and get recycled and come back out again.
Yeah, the big cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful book, and anybody that out there that would still like to find one, I'm sure that they can find one somewhere, but
I'm afraid I don't have any.
No, mine is a prized possession now, that's for sure. But I will definitely run through, with your permission, to cycle some of these through the video when I'm showing this. But that's, you were a big influence on me in that way as well, because, that idea of working the print kind of to death, even though we were saying that it was the same thing in the morning. The process of going through that, though, is, I think, the most important thing, because it's all part of that developing of the relationship with what the subject that you're photographing while you're in the darkroom. I mean, it grows again in the darkroom, and your work is just so much. It's very beautiful. I don't know of anybody else, actually. I mean,
come on, Bill.
not to pull your chain that much, but I really don't. I mean, when you sit down and you look at a silver print, or any kind of a print, and it moves you some physically and mentally all at the same time, that's something. It doesn't happen very often, and you pulled that off a few times with me. And I'll show that one that I was talking to you about earlier with the little church in the background, the big hole.
Yeah.
When I find it, I might have to request that from you.
That's okay.
But but this continued. When did you start feeling, when did you start having your first, say, exhibition, or you know, when it actually started, you actually started to feel that confidence in yourself to really push it on? I mean, from the early 60s to the point where I met you maybe in the early 2000s, it's quite a bit of time in there.
Yeah. Well, I just, for a long time, just did my own thing, and I worked through the day shifts in the hospitals,
Right.
and then I print through the night very often, or a good bit of it. And
Yeah.
then when eventually I moved out of hospital practice and came into family practice,
Right.
which is really where my heart was. I then joined a club for the first time.
Okay.
I didn't know what a photographic
So you
club
got
was,
you
but
started to
I
hang around
thought
with other photographers. Yeah.
So they were all at different stages of their amateur careers or hobbies, as it really was about.
Right.
And I found someone who had a little caravan in the bottom of their garden, a little tiny, cheap caravan, no water or anything, but it did have light. And she would let me use it at night. So I'd do a 12-hour day, and then I'd go and print into the small hours of the morning in her caravans. They'd all gone to bed, and I just printed there, and we carried buckets of water down. Put them
Yeah,
outside
you did
and
that
all
way. Yeah.
stuff.
So you could wash and things.
And then I'd come home in the early hours and get a couple of hours sleep, and then start again.
Wow, it's just amazing. Oh boy, Tim.
And that was my first sight
Of Horsetail Falls.
Horsetail Falls.
So you went out there by accident and got this
Well,
the thing that thousands of people go in time to go.
Yeah, and we just we were walking along the bottom, and we just suddenly looked up and saw this glowing golden fireball.
Oh,
So that was it.
I'm gonna.
Couple of different versions.
I've got a
the
few
trees on
Yosemite
top
folks
as
I'm going to
well.
have to show this to. That's just beautiful, Tim. So here's these commonalities again. I mean, there was so many sleepless nights, or I'd be in my house and, you know, it'd be 4 o'clock in the morning and I'd think, oh no, I'm in trouble. I've been up too long or something, you know.
Yeah, and the other thing is, how did it get to 4 o'clock?
Yeah,
You
how
know,
did
and
that
it just
come around?
came in here.
You know, and that drive of having that drive to want to do something so much, you know, doesn't happen that often. I mean, like you say, I felt it's a gift, but at times it's a curse as well, you know what I mean? Because sometimes I can't separate myself from it. You know, I want to do it so much that, you know, that I just can't.
You have to do it. If it's
Yeah.
in you, you have to do it, I guess.
And I suppose that's why we advance a little further than your normal sane person that's sitting down and watching TV or something.
I think
But
so.
yeah, so it's interesting to find these commonalities. We've never had the conversation before about this. You know, we've sat around tables at breakfast and stuff and talked about a little bit of things, but I never really got into the depth of who made you what you are, and I get it now. We're all very similar in that way.
Yeah, well.
Well, I really appreciate this, Tim. I could talk to you forever about all this stuff, but I'm going to have to cut off here sooner or later and let you get back to your regular life. But I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I thought you were going to do this a Welsh comedian called Rob Brydon, and he does a series of interviews, and he often finishes, well, I could go on talking to you like this for the next 2 or 3 minutes. But I think
Yeah, you know, I think I got about 60 more seconds in me, so we can look it up. No, honestly,
Okay.
I could talk about, and you know, I've been here all day with Tim, and we you know, with your lovely wife, we went to lunch, and it was really nice, and we've had a lot of conversation. I've been trying to save some of it for this, but some of it did come out when we were talking before that I'm probably not remembering right now that I would like to get on tape or on electrons if I could, but this has been fantastic, Tim. I really can't thank you enough.
Well, I'm so glad you came. It's lovely to catch up with you again.
Yeah,
You know,
you too.
we haven't seen each other
Hopefully
for
it won't be another 10 years
for
or
years,
more.
yeah.
I think maybe it was 2009.
Was it?
Yeah. Remember that picture I got of you and Sandy was holding her hand out?
Oh yeah.
I think
Yes.
that was,
Yes, I got that.
I dug that one out the other day. I'll have to put that in
That
the
was
video as well.
that was good.
Yeah, Tim playing in Iceland. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much.
Okay,
I really
Bill.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.